There are 12 kids down at the beach, and they're all picking up rocks and throwing them, skipping stones or splashing them. The 11 of them are doing that. The 12th one is David, and he's picking up the stones and looking underneath them to see what creepy crawly things are there. That's what fascinates him, and I think translating that to real life, he sees somebody walking and talking and life goes on, but what's inside this person? Who has come out of a coma? Why do they see things differently?
Thank you.
The dead zone in the book partly was a medical condition brought about by a brain tumor, and it had to do with those parts of the future that he really couldn't see, he couldn't anticipate. What I did was have a moment where the doctor, played by Herbert Lom, says,
"Not only can you see the future, you can change it. That is your dead zone."
So there's that shift there, because you see the future, you change something in the present, it changes the future. What does that do to your vision? Well, it invalidates your vision. Suddenly your vision of the future is inaccurate. And so that was the dead zone of uncertainty.
The key with Christopher was to get this jolt, and when he touched someone's hand, it wasn't enough to just assume there'd be creepy music or a high point emotionally. He wanted to physically jolt himself.
In a certain very real sense, the director is there to give the actor whatever he needs to play the role to its fullest. And Chris, for the moments where he has these visions, which are painful and sharp, and asked me to fire off a .44 Magnum pistol without telling him when I was going to do it. When we were shooting those scenes, in particular the close-ups, where he has these sudden flashes of the future that come to him. And so I spent a lot of that movie with a gun in my hand, which is not my style, I have to say, but certainly it was in the making of The Dead Zone that I actually had to learn quite a lot about guns. And finally found myself actually firing off an Uzi submachine gun and then an AK-47 assault rifle in order to get reactions from the extras when Johnny's about to shoot Stilson and everybody scatters. Of course they were blanks.
There was the initial prologue, I believe, and my recollection is that Johnny Smith as a child has been skating on the ice and has a premonition that something is going to happen to someone who's about to jumpstart his car. He clips the cables, inverse polarity, and it explodes, and he's covered in battery acid and all these terrible things. And so this is the inkling that Johnny had something other than just growing up on his mind.
And I do believe that that's in the book as well. And we did shoot that. We shot all of that. And I felt it was better not to know Johnny as a child and to have another actor playing him as a child. I really felt his presence as an adult was enough to shift between before his accident and after. And so I was sure that the movie had to be played from Johnny's point of view. And so I came up with the idea of having Johnny be present in his own visions, that the visions should come right into his life as solidly as everybody sitting here, and then disappear again. And so the audience would feel the reality of the visions that Johnny felt. The visions had to be very compelling for the movie to work. There had to be no doubt that they had some kind of reality to Johnny. Going along with my idea that Johnny should actually be in his own visions, we decided to try to find a way to have him be in the little girl's burning bedroom. He is in a bed, after all, in the hospital, and it would be a very straightforward transition with cutting to have him be in this little girl's bedroom. He sees that this girl's house is on fire and that she's trapped in her bedroom.
We ended up constructing a set, a very elaborate set with drywall and steel and all sorts of things, so the fire wouldn't go past the structure that we had built. There were all kinds of fireman safety things, but what no one realized at the time was that all the toys that were on fire, one of them was an E.T. doll, which meant, uh-oh, so we had to reshoot all of that and burn something that was much more anonymous.
This was before the days of CGI. There was no computer stuff going on at all. Chris was very willing to sit in a bed that we set on fire, basically. Although there was a hole in the bed and he was actually well underneath it, and it was not his legs or his body that we set on fire in the bed. But he really was in a burning room. And he had an escape hatch that he could go right out under the bed. We had to build up the stage so that he could slip out from underneath.
If you look closely at Christopher Walken in the bed, he appears to be perspiring, but he was coated in something called Zell Gel, created by an effects guy out of New York called Gary Zeller, who did all the effects on scanners. And this is the common thing now when people are doing burn scenes. They will cover themselves with this fluid gel, which will last maybe 3 minutes until it itself evaporates. But it added to the scene.
And in that first vision sets it up incredibly well, that what the visions feel like to him, they're terrifying to him and forceful because he's in them. He almost feels as though he's in danger. And yet, as he says later in the gazebo scene,
I stood there. I did nothing.
if he stayed there, he would see this little girl catch fire and burn to death without being able to do a thing to stop it, even though he feels his presence in the room, but he isn't really present, of course. And so that really set the stage for our understanding of what his visions were and why they were so draining. Because another thing that I added to the sort of concept of the visions was that they were exhausting him, really draining his life force, as the Herbert Lom character says.
As the spells, the visions grow stronger and more powerful, so the body weakens.
Imagine living like that at any moment, without any anticipation, you could suddenly be plunged into a vision of some disaster that emotionally involves you, but prevents you from doing anything about it. I think everybody was actually pretty excited about the World War II vision. And I think the way that I had originally thought of it was that right in the clinic, as he's having this vision holding Vizek's hand, a tank should come right through the wall of the clinic and almost run them over. And that would be our intro into the vision. And it seemed that the mechanics of this, I thought, were going to get very awkward and very forced, very mechanical. And so ultimately we dropped that idea.
When we talk about The Dead Zone as a David Cronenberg film, I think that the one Cronenberg scene that everyone remembers, and it's just purely Cronenberg, is the death of Frank Dodd. In the book, he slits his throat. In Cronenberg's adaptation, we have this brilliant, crazed scene of Frank Dodd driving himself into this pair of scissors in this very ritualistic act, in this very bizarre bathroom setting. And it's pure Cronenberg, but it's also pure genius because that's the visual aesthetic.
Somehow I arrived at the idea of Dodd using scissors, sort of barber scissors, which are very nasty and very sharp and have a very distinct look, as a weapon that he would use to murder his victims. It just seemed eccentric, and in the novel it might be a straight razor, but every murderer is unique, of course, and I didn't want to play him just as, I say, a modular murder, and I wanted him to be very specific without actually getting into why the scissors would have significance to him. Did his mother cut his hair as a youth with him, and somehow he connected that with her sexuality and her sensuality as she touches him? We don't know. I'm making that up right on the spot right now, but it works. And so I connect those scissors with his mother, and therefore I wanted him to kill himself with the scissors in a very painful way, as though he's punishing himself, and so he does.
Impaling himself on a pair of barber scissors in his mouth was a pretty horrific image. And then when we're doing horrific images in the cutting room, it's usually with a great deal of delight, and we enjoy it. We usually ask people in and don't tell them what we're going to show them and see how they react. We just enjoy it a lot in a very slightly perverse manner, perhaps.
You leave my boy alone!
And the fact that this monster of a mother is still capable herself of killing, that she tries to kill Johnny because she knows that he's a danger to her son, tells you even more about where that boy came from and why he grew up the way he did.
It's the tipping point of the film. In other words, it builds to this place that's pure horror, and things are going to get worse. Now we're going to take this whole story to the other place that it's going, which is about this horrible decision that John Smith has to make. And the question of whether, if you're put in this situation, need to or have to pull the trigger to end something you think is going to happen.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Secretary, the missiles are flying.